I used to work as a county coroner. I won't say where since it's a matter of public record and I wish to remain anonymous. Just know it was a fairly rural area and the sheriff was really the only law enforcement in the area. This account is concerning a series of bodies that were found, on which I performed autopsies. The first body was found by a local farmer in one of his pastures. I was tasked with determining the cause of death, which is standard procedure whenever a body is found under mysterious circumstances. The body was still slightly warm when EMS arrived on the scene, particularly notable because it was quite chilly that morning, meaning it could not have been dead long before it was discovered. From the outside, the body looked healthy, and the blood work was completely normal. You wouldn't have known anything was wrong unless you took a peek inside. I knew something was wrong as soon as I made my first incision. It's hard to describe, and I don't want to be too graphic about it, so I'll just say that the consistency was off. Like, the connective tissue was too dense in some places, too tough, and then almost non-existent in others. The next point of note was the near lack of digestive organs. The thing didn't look like it had any way to digest food of any kind, and judging by the lack of scar tissue, it appeared to be a natural defect. The likely cause of death was immediately apparent when I began inspecting the chest cavity. It was the heart. The thing had some sort of congenital heart defect. The tissue all looked healthy, but anatomically, it only remotely resembled a human heart. It was far too large for one thing, and perhaps fatally, all of the veins and arteries seemed to enter together, all directly connected only to the left ventricle. There was no physical way for this heart to effectively pump blood, if it could even pump blood at all. No one with a heart condition like that could have grown to adulthood. I'd be surprised if someone with that sort of condition lived for an hour, let alone the apparent 20 or 30 years of that body. That night I had dreams of deformed figures swarming my house like something out of a zombie movie. I went into work early the next morning, partly because after my nightmares, I found myself lying in bed awake before dawn, unable to get back to sleep, but mainly because I received a call about 5 a.m. that they had recovered another unidentifiable body. This one was found in a pond, cold and stiff. Again, there were no signs of trauma to the body. This body felt off the same way as the first, and also showed the same general underdeveloped nature, especially the digestive system. The heart looked better, but there were no kidneys. The lungs were fairly stiff, though the lung tissue itself looked healthy, making some sort of disease or damage unlikely to be the cause of their inadequacy. When the blood work returned, the cause of death was immediately clear. The thing had almost no red blood cells, even with healthy lungs, which this thing obviously did not have. Asphyxiation would have taken place extremely quickly. On further inspection, the creature also completely lacked bone marrow. Note I said completely lacked. I didn't say it was damaged or diseased. It was completely missing. There were no signs it was ever there. Instead of soft, spongy tissue on the inside of the bone was solid all the way through. The sheriff demanded I show him the bodies. He wanted to confirm my reports for himself. I don't blame him. Things were usually fairly quiet in his domain, and 2 mystery deaths with equally mysterious bodies in 2 days was a bit hard to swallow. Heck, I was pretty worried about it myself. Though he was worried about crime statistics, well, I was more worried about the 2 bodies in my morgue that defied all medical explanations. I showed him where the bodies were stored and had one of my assistants keep an eye on him while he took a look. I didn't want to spend any more time around those things than I had to. I obviously, given my profession, am not generally bothered by corpses, but the twisted forms put me on edge. I don't think it's hard to see why. You learn from your books all sorts of things about human anatomy and biology, and then suddenly find yourself face to face with a creature that defies all explanation. It'd be unsettling for anyone, but for a trained expert, I think it just hits a little bit harder. Just a couple days later, the next body turned up. This one was still technically alive when they found it too, though it died in the hospital a couple hours later. It showed no EKG activity while it was alive. However, despite the lack of brain activity, the body continued to breathe on its own for several hours before succumbing to cardiac arrest. The autopsy revealed similar underdevelopments as the others, though this heart was only moderately deformed. There was also an orange-sized bundle of what appeared to be brain tissue in the chest cavity. About 12 hours later, the next body was found, though the cause of death for that one was abundantly apparent. Gunshot. One of the deputies was investigating a call about a trespasser, and when confronted, the suspect let out a shrill shriek, which the deputy said sounded more animal than human, and then it charged towards him. The officer opened fire on his attacker, striking it 4 times. Normally, I wouldn't perform an autopsy on a clear shooting-related death, but given the strange bodies over the previous days, I reluctantly gave in to my better judgment and examined the body. If it hadn't been shot, I doubt it would have survived long anyways. The liver was nearly completely absent, except for half a lobe that wasn't actually connected to the circulatory system in any meaningful way. There was only one lung present as well, and it was hard to tell due to ballistic damage, but the heart appeared to be far undersized. I've tried to stay clinical, professional so far. Force of habit, I guess. Comes with the job, but the strange bodies were taking a toll on me. The things weren't human. I had zero doubt in my mind by the time I had dissected the third one. The thing that got me, though, and maybe this is a bit more of an abstract fear, wasn't that there were monsters walking around. There's nothing particularly shocking about that. A bear or a mountain lion could attack me as well. They're monsters in a way. In my line of work, I guess you get used to the general biological frailty of life. Nah, the thing that got me was that, judging by the fact none of them were put together enough to stand any real chance of living for even a week, whatever was behind them, whatever had the ability to put together things like these human mimics, had little idea of how biological life works. Which to me, I think reveals a far more concerning state of affairs. At least then, if whatever was behind them understood biology, I could guess what sort of entity or group was putting these things together. Even if it was wild speculation, I could safely assume some sort of internal consistency to its aims. On the other hand, something with the ability to create these things, but lacking a basic understanding of biology or anatomy, must have such a foreign, otherworldly understanding of us. If our basic biology is so occult to it, despite its apparent skill or power to create these fully formed bodies, how could we possibly understand its motives? There's no rational explanation for something that can create things like these, but yet make such glaring mistakes. It was like an expert carpenter who didn't understand the concept of wood grain. The next and last body I would encounter was found on my doorstep. I came across the body as I was returning home for the night. Like the others, it was wearing ill-fitting clothes. Unlike the others, this one had something else with it. A knife. Well, it was sharp anyway. It was one long, double-edged, perfectly symmetrical blade with no handle. It was impossible to hold without slicing up your hand. I suppose whatever was making these things and sending them out didn't know any more about knives than it did about anatomy. It was quite a morbid sight, all things considered. Unlike the others, this one was visibly, clearly deformed based on its external appearances alone. Perhaps it was rushed or set loose early, or perhaps whatever the source of the thing was underestimated how important skin is. I called the sheriff and told him it was on my porch. Then I got in my truck and I've never gone back. I haven't been within 1,000 miles of that place since. The distance helps me feel a little safer, but not much. I'm almost certain the one on my porch was sent to kill me. Maybe I know too much. Maybe they just didn't like me cutting into their friends. I've spent most of my time since then wondering if it'll look for me again. But after all, like I said above, there's no way to understand the motives of something like that.